Hi there. It was 1976, on my second visit to South Africa, that I first encountered the South African Police Riot Unit. 76 had started mass disorder in the townships around the major cities, which included school children staying off school, refusing to go to school, setting fire to the schools, lots of outbreaks of arson, council buildings, government buildings within the township being attacked, roads blocked, burning barricades, police attacked, police officers attacked, and so on. And the Peninsula Anti-Riot Unit was very thinly stretched. At night they were in the townships dealing with the disorder there, and then in the day lots of the rioters had come into the city centre and started protesting and generally misbehaving, so the riot unit had to deploy there as well, so they were sort of on continuous deployment. And I saw a lot of their actions at the time. I was also able to go on patrol with the police, not the riot unit, the Orthodox police, and I must admit I wasn't really impressed with the level of training of the police, particularly in firearms at the time. A lot of it was outdated, one-hand target shooting, and also the equipment. Things like, they were still mainly wearing virtually a ceremonial uniform. They had a holster which, although they were largely carrying semi-autos, it was designed for revolvers. It had a flap, but on top of the flap was a pouch for spare ammunition, which was closed with a press stud. And this pouch stopped you actually opening the flap. So drawing your pistol became a two-handed maneuver. Then in the early 90s, I started presenting courses up north in the Transvaal, in the Joburg area, and there were a lot of police officers on the courses. And on the first course, talking to some of the police who were quite baby-faced young guys who nevertheless had vast experience, lots and lots of gunfights, working in such units as the Flying Squad or operating in some of the more dangerous areas. And by this time the firearms training had improved, and this was probably due to the influence of civilian combat shooting, which was popular in South Africa. In fact, they had a world champion from 1979, so it was a popular activity. And also, like in America, this influenced the police and the military to upgrade their standards, and they always are kind of one step behind what the civilians are doing. But nevertheless, it was a vast improvement. Also equipment, they started wearing more utility type uniforms and this kind of thing. And on that first course there was a chap called Jimmy, who was a member of the Internal Stability Unit, and he told us about their operations in the townships, mainly Alex Township in the Caspers, the big massive armoured vehicles, and they would drive the entire shift, taking gunfire, AK rounds ricocheting off the vehicle, petrol bomb attacks, blasting through barricades, this kind of thing, and also collecting dead bodies. And I found this amazing, that by the end of the shift they might have 6 dead bodies in the cask when they had to take them to the mortuary at the end of the shift. So it seemed outlandish, but I'll quote you from an article written by a foreign journalist who was embedded with the unit. They passed through the dark township like sailors in an urban submarine. Inside their armoured shell, the only sounds are the cough and twitter of the police radio, the soft whoosh of air conditioning, and an edgy banter in Afrikaans. The men of the police internal stability unit clutch their automatic rifles and peer out at South Africa's most war-shattered black township, scanning the trash heaps for fresh corpses, trying to ignore the smouldering glares that mark them among the most reviled white men in South Africa. I also presented a course at the SWAT training centre at Krugersdorp, and they had a very, very interesting training setup, which was a series of buildings to practice shack attack for in the townships. And one of the innovations was across the top, across the roofs, was wires, and they could drop a grenade into the road, obviously a dummy grenade, to train the guys in grenade drills. And it was very good. It was good realistic training. Anyway, a couple of years later, when Marcus was over, he wanted to photograph a lot of stuff, and we went to the SWAT centre, and I spoke to the Colonel Mike, and I said, Marcus wants to photograph the shacks, and he said they've gone. They had a lot of illegal immigrants come into South Africa from the neighbouring countries, and they saw these ready-made shacks and just took them for their own use, either carried them off whole or disassembled them to the informal settlements. So that's just a little insight into what it was like. A few years later, or about a year after Marcus's visit, we had several guys from the unit, from the Internal Stability Unit at Kloekop, attend the bodyguard course. It was the colonel, the warrant officer and the training sergeant. And we got on well with each other, struck up a friendship, and they invited me to present courses at their unit, and mainly weapons and tactics training courses, which I did. And I was also invited to go operationally with them. So we did helicopter operations, what we call chopper drops, house penetrations in Tembisa, roadblocks, this kind of thing. At this stage, the public disorder had subsided slightly, because this was post the elections, post the new constitution, and it was mainly now the unit was focusing on violent crime. So we weren't operating in Caspers and in Yalas anymore. It was venture vehicles and bakkies. It was still very dangerous work. South Africa was still at the time the murder capital of the world. And so it was with this kind of experience in mind that I was delighted to purchase a book which was written by a former Riot unit sergeant, Nick Howarth. and he was a member at Danuta. And in the book, he talks about joining the police in 1986, going for the 6-month training program at the police college, being one of only a handful of English-speaking candidates in what is largely an Afrikaans organisation, similarly the army is as well. And even though lessons are supposed to be 50-50 English and Afrikaans, they tend to be mainly in Afrikaans, and you're just expected to be able to sort of get on with it. Very hard training, very physical, very much a disciplined training experience with an emphasis on drill, saluting, but a lot of running, a lot of distance marches, carrying logs and things like this, a lot of punishment, PT, and that kind of thing. Then towards the end of the training, they were sent to northern Transvaal area to Vertrek, which was a very specialist training area, and this was for counterinsurgency / public order training, with an emphasis again on physical training. Basically, a lot of it was akin to soldiering. Use of light machine guns, grenades, a lot of grenade drills. South African police do have really good grenade drill, which I actually adopted for VIP protection. The grenade drill that we had previously was okay, and but the South Africans, because of the threat, the ever-present threat of grenades, had a better drill. It was more of a team effort drill. So following training, they returned and spent a short time doing operations in the East Rand, and then a group of them were selected to go to another different rural training area to do reaction unit training, and this was based around the tactics of urban warfare, house penetration, again a lot of shooting with all the different weapons. And at the time they were issued with the Beretta pistol, 9mm pistol, a Beretta 202 shotgun, which was pump action. The police also had their own version, the Musler shotgun, which was a nightmare. It was a terrible shotgun, but the Beretta was decent. A couple of smoke grenades and riot helmet and respirator. That was the normal kit. So following the reaction unit training, there were 3 passed out of 47 candidates, including the author Nick. So he was then part of the East Rand reaction unit, and they were basically doing a lot of house penetration on behalf of other departments of the police, murder and robbery units particularly, or some of the units concerned with terrorism, going after these characters. And many times they'd go in, recover, find the guys, they'd be sleeping there with an Uzi or an AK, grenades, explosives, this kind of thing. It was a very high risk venture. And towards the end of the tour, they were doing up to sometimes 15 house penetrations a day. So you can just imagine the depth of experience and exposure to violence that they had. They were mainly operating in the townships of Catlahan and Tokosa, and also sometimes Tembisa. And they were coming up against the hardcore Umkhonto fighters. And after a period of time, he was promoted to sergeant. Things got really bad, and in June of '88, a national state of emergency was declared by the president. And then, short time later, the reaction unit was disbanded, and Sergeant Nick went back to normal public order duties in the Internal Stability Division. So in the book he talks about it almost becomes a routine every time they leave the base. They're coming under fire, petrol bombs. He describes how these really, really deadly petrol bombs are made. I'm not going to broadcast it here, the ingredients, be irresponsible, how they're made, but it's not just a bottle of petrol. And these were fearsome. Also, these groups, they call them self-defense units, but they were basically insurgent groups within the townships and the informal settlements, what we used to call squatter camps, would create ambush pits. So they dig a pit. A lot of the roads are unpaved, very deep, and cover it so it looked like it was the normal ground, and the vehicle would tilt into it, and you probably wouldn't be able to reverse out of it. They would be 45 degrees down. And even the massive Caspers, let alone the Inyalas, which are a bit smaller, would be in there. Now, Caspers open at the top, so it was vulnerable to petrol bomb attack, and they'd be waiting, obviously, and come out, and you were static, couldn't manoeuvre. So very fraught circumstances. Many officers were killed during this period. During the elections, the run-up to the 94 elections, massive intimidation. The unit was reorganised, and it became, instead of Internal Stability Unit or Internal Stability Division, in Afrikaans it was known as RBS, Afrikaans letters. It became POPS, Public Order Policing Service. He was sent to another training area, Maleeskop, where they had a public order training program there, which the Afrikaans acronym is OOPS, which I always thought was amusing. During this time, they did operations with the task force, the Tarkies, because of the high-risk nature of a lot of what they were doing. And those guys really are the specialists in house penetration and the ability to operate on an unknown floor plan. He mentions that one of his colleagues who was on detachment to Vertrek, who was as an instructor, there was a training accident where a live grenade was initiated, and David grabbed it, went to run outside to throw it, but saw there was a whole group of students out there, so he ran into a corner and hugged it to himself and took the full blast and saved the guys in the room, sacrificed himself for it. So the highest traditions of a police service. So the book strikes me as being very honest. It certainly fits to a lot of the stuff I heard at the time. from guys like Jimmy and also people in the Clorcop unit. The massive disorder that went on, it was a lot of it was caused by faction fighting. This was because workers were brought for the mines, the gold mines, from other areas of South Africa, including from KwaZulu-Natal. And that is, as the name suggests, a Zulu area. So you had thousands of Zulus being transported into a Xhosa area, and they were put up in hostels. And there would be one hostel from one faction attacking a hostel from another faction, and there would be bloodbaths. Likewise on the trains or at the train stations, and both sides were equally savage. A lot of necklacing, which is tying a guy up with barbed wire, putting a car tyre around him, slipping it down over him, soaking the whole thing and him in petrol, sending the light. Terrible way to kill somebody. Or beheadings, disembowelings. The guys from the unit would roll up at a scene, and there'd be bits hanging from trees and things like this, dismembered people. Truly savage. And this was black on black, African on African violence. Then on top of that, you had the ANC had declared war on the police, and they were intent on causing as much havoc to the police as possible. So the kind of activities that the units were doing would far exceed the imagination of police officers in most of the Western countries. It was true frontline policing. And sure that they were policing under apartheid, but the book has many instances of the riot unit officers running into burning buildings to save African victims inside, and rescued many of them, kept them alive. So they were human as well. And I found it very funny in a way that when the Soccer World Cup was held in South Africa, I think it was 2010, memory serves, I saw on the news the French police were over training the South African police in riot control. And to me, this is like somebody from a Sunday League football club expected to train the guys from Liverpool Football Club. There's no comparison. I know the French have had their moments of disorder, but that sustained campaign and the level of expertise and experience that was built up within the internal stability units and later public order policing, it was massive. The unit at Clorcop in the armoury, they had general purpose machine guns, they had fragmentation grenades, they had all sorts of kit, and that had been used during the bad old days. So if you're interested in policing, interested in the Southern African conflicts, it's a terrific book, and I'll put the link where you can get hold of it.